Welcome to my second video taking a look at some of the most murder-stricken corners of the globe and some of the reasons behind these reputations. I don't simply mean to show these regions in a bad light, even though these cities are often beautiful in parts and do have relatively safe zones, they also have reputations that cannot be denied. So without further ado, I bring you In the 1950s, the city of Acapulco in Mexico was a destination for the rich and famous, with many wealthy figures and celebrities making the city their choice for vacation. However, throughout the 1960s and 70s, the city, in an attempt to attract more modest tourism, built more affordable hotels, making it less exclusive and far more prone to crime. It became increasingly worse in the 80s, when the economy saw a huge drop in tourism. But by the time the 90s came around, the city was experiencing a great deal of drug trafficking, which brought with it a further increase in violent crime. The Mexican military tried to save the city's tarnished reputation in 2009, when they shot and killed a major drug cartel leader, Arturo Beltran-Leyva, who controlled Acapulco's drug trade. But instead of enriching the city, Leyva's death gave the way for other gangs to stake their claim on the city. Despite the arrest in 2010 of Beltran-Leyva's right-hand man, Edgar Valdez Villarreal, the gang war still rages on today, affecting thousands of innocent people. So let's look at the recent numbers. In 2011, Acapulco's murder rate stood at 128 murders per 100,000 people. But 2012 was the worst of recent years, with 142 murders per 100,000. In 2014, the numbers fell to a still formidable rate of 104 per 100,000, but that rose again in 2015 to 116 murders per 100,000 people. Unfortunately, these numbers are not exclusive to gang members and drug dealers. They affect people from all walks of life. Like many of the South American murder-stricken regions, João Pessoa looks in part at least to be a small paradise. Known as a city where the sun rises first, due to its easternmost position on the South American map, João Pessoa is known for its green, picturesque rural areas. But behind this green curtain lies another city that rates high on the murder scale in many recent years. The city is 81.3 square miles, with a relatively high population of approximately 1.2 million occupants. So together with drug dealers and a high rate of poverty, maybe this surprising ratio plays a role in João Pessoa's infamous reputation for murder. In 2012, the rate was 76 murders per 100,000 people. In 2013, it was 71 per 100,000. And in 2015, the city's murder rate was 58 per 100,000 people. So unlike other locations on our list, the murder rate is on decline at least. Let's hope it continues to fall. When you read that in 2009, 97% of homicides in Guatemala as a whole were unsolved, it makes you wonder why that is. But the country was caught up in a civil war from 1960 right up until 1996. Fighting between the Guatemalan government and the indigenous Mayan people of Guatemala raged on for 36 years. So it's actually no wonder then that even today the people see little or no justice. Now, as a rule, I don't include cities within countries at war on my list, but as the civil war ended 20 years ago, I have decided to include Guatemala's capital. Guatemala City, as the capital, was so badly affected that in the present post-war climate, the homicide rate is still extremely high, no doubt as a byproduct of bad feelings of years past. In 2012, the city experienced 99 murders a week on average. This rose to 101 per week in 2013, and with policing being thin on the ground and reportedly underpaid, the outlook is bleak. In 2015, the city saw 47 murders per 100,000 people, but interestingly, the Guatemalan National Police did not include homicides if the victim left the crime scene before dying. This ludicrous protocol means that the murder rates could be much higher than actually reported. In fact, the National Institute of Forensic Sciences in Guatemala City have claimed that the numbers for 2012 and 2013, two of the worst years to date, may be as much as 16% higher than officially reported. Before concentrating on the city of San Salvador, it's worth mentioning that El Salvador as a whole is regarded as an epicenter for the Central American gang crisis, along with Honduras and Guatemala. In 2012, the city saw an average of 16 murders a day, but in April of that year there was a mass gang truce, with 18 formidable gangs taking part. This cut the daily murder rate to 5. And on April the 14th, 2012, for the first time in over 3 years, there were no killings in the entire country. Sadly, the numbers began to increase again, and in 2015, the record amount of murders in one day was a massive 43. Many of those killings happened in the capital of San Salvador. In a similar vein to San Pedro Sula, featured in my first video, the San Salvador gang situation had its genesis in the 90s, when Latin gangs were deported from Los Angeles and spread across Central America. In 2011, San Salvador's murder rate was 58 per 100,000 people. The gang truce of 2012 obviously had an impact, as the numbers of murders that year fell to 32 per 100,000 people. In 2013, it increased to 45 per 100,000, and in 2014, it increased again to 61. Now, on the Central and Southern American scale, those numbers are considered relatively low, but in 2015, the number rose to 108 murders per 100,000 people, almost 3 times that of 2012. Sadly, despite apparently having a brighter future a few years ago, San Salvador was rated 3rd on the most murderous cities of 2015, while Caracas and San Pedro Sula were rated 1st and 2nd respectively. When it comes to Venezuela, Caracas stands out as its most dangerous city, as covered in part 1. But in 2015, the city of Maturin made headlines despite being relatively low on previous yearly lists. However, in 2015, it was rated the 5th worst affected city in the world. It's difficult to find out previous records on Maturin's murder rate, as it hasn't even made the top 50 on lists predating 2015, but I felt I had to include it here, as it came in so high on the latest report. There were a reported 505 murders in the city last year, which is well shy of the 3,946 which took place in Caracas. But when you consider that the population of Maturin is less than 600,000 people, the 86 murders per 100,000 people last year is a pretty grim statistic. That's it from me for now. As mentioned in my earlier video on this same subject, I'm sure all of these countries have safe areas to visit, and the worst affected areas are more often than not tarnished by gang and drug related crime. You should also consider the high poverty levels, unemployment and corrupt governments when judging these regions, as these factors almost certainly play a huge role in their reputations. As always, if you like what I do, please subscribe and follow, and I'll see you next time.